Okay. All right. So 3, 2, 1. Hey guys, welcome to the Iron Kraken podcast. This is the episode about the Fyreslayers. My buddy Jake has joined me to talk about 2 lists and some angry little fire dwarves, or Dwarden as they are called now. So Jake, say hello to everybody and give us a little introduction. How did you get into the army and to the game itself, and what do you think of AOS?
Yeah, so I started playing, I guess, when I was in middle school or high school at a pretty early age. And I think, like a lot of people, I kind of just grew away from it when the time came to go to college, things like that. And then things have sort of settled down in my professional life in the past, I would say, 3 years. And I've just gotten back into it. I spend a lot of time at Maplewood Hobby. There's a great community there. And it's a nice, easy drive for me. So Fridays there are a pretty great day. And that's pretty much how I found my way back to it. As far as Age of Sigmar goes, I was always playing fantasy. I was never really into 40K when I was a kid. So it was a natural progression for me to get back into Age of Sigmar. And I guess for the game specifically that I really like about Age of Sigmar is that the game revolves around, you can play the game however you want, which is great. But the game really, from a competitive point of view, revolves around what's going on inside the General's Handbook, and specifically the missions. And in almost none of those missions are there any rewards for kill points. It's often the tiebreaker, but the main mission is based on how well did you play the mission, how well did you craft your army to enable you to play the mission. And I personally like that. I don't like how some other game systems reward destroying opponents' models. So yeah, that's what I liked about Age of Sigmar.
Awesome. Yeah, man. I mean, I've met you for the first time. I think it was at one of Martin Orlando's events.
Yeah, I think it's B-Strat.
Yeah, at the B Strategy, exactly. And I had the pleasure of playing your Sylvaneth with Drycha kind of combo. And then from then on, you've actually moved on to Fyreslayers, which we're going to be talking about tonight. There's your little champion god killing off the giant magma drop titan. So tell us a little bit about the Fyreslayers. Why did you move away from Sylvaneth? I mean, rules.
Yeah.
But what made you choose the Fyreslayers? Like what got you, why not Daughters of Cain? Because considering you had Morathi at the time.
Sure. Yeah. So I think that Sylvaneth, they caught a big fat nerf with that new book. And the way that I personally like to play, which fits with my love of the GHB missions, is playing the mission. I'm not interested in trying to kill your units unless there's an absolute necessity for that. I really like playing what I think Luke McCarthy would describe as alpha bunker. So I like taking the objectives, and I like making it basically impossible for you to get me off the objectives. And that's how I had been playing Sylvaneth for about 2 years. I was running, as you said, with the old Winterleaf Battalion. You were able to include Morathi. I don't know what Games Workshop was thinking with that, but that you could do it. And I had been doing that with about 120 Dryads. And the whole concept was Morathi was this unkillable beast that I would use to lock you in your deployment zone. Then I'd flood the table with Dryads. And when that went away, I was looking for something similar, because that's how I like to play the game. And I find that in a competitive setting, it's highly effective. And, before Sylvaneth, I played Vanguard Wing, which is another army that plays exactly the same.
Right.
So I think Fyreslayers offer in a competitive setting, an alpha bunker play style. And the way that they do that is with Hearthguard Berserkers. Now they have, two other infantry units. So very, the army's two kits. If we're being, real here, there's one kit that you can make Hearthguard Berserkers out of, or Arc Hearthguard, and then there's another kit that you can make Volkite Berserkers out of. So I think from a high level, the idea is very difficult to kill infantry that are largely battle shock immune, and also depending on how you're running it, you can attack at the top of the combat phase. So if you're on an objective and you charge in with your Maw Crusher, who is big old damage guy, right? He's going to charge in there. I'm going to activate at the top of the combat phase, and he's either going to be dead or disabled to the point where you're not going to be able to do any meaningful amount of damage to me. So I guess the way that happens, we obviously have the command ability, but I guess we can talk about the lodges real quick.
Yeah. Well, give us a little rundown in terms of just the lore. I don't know if you're, just a little bit. To
be honest with you,
You're very competitive. Like that's the and that's good. That's good. Just tell us about like your perspective on it.
Yeah. So I'm not really into the lore on, especially on the Fyreslayers. I think I fell down that rabbit hole with the Sylvaneth a little bit more, but they have. So I guess Fyreslayers have, firstly, a pretty unique allegiance ability. Every turn, you get to use a different rune, and the rune gives an army-wide buff to everybody in your army. And you roll a die. And on a 6, you get an enhanced effect, which is basically whatever the effect was times 2. If you roll 1, you...
Seems that we lost Jake there for a second.
I like having those sorts of tools.
I think we just lost you there for a second. Your screen just went.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. So again, you said that you have those runes. Just restate the whole idea.
Yeah. So the idea with the runes is you have. Let's see, I have them right in front of me here. You have 6, obviously 5 turns of the game. You can use a different rune each turn, and it lasts until your next hero phase. And what's cool about the runes is they're all helpful. I'd say none of them are bad. But they offer flexibility at different points of the game with different things. So I think the most important one, Fyreslayers infantry are base move 4. So you have what I call the rune of movement, which is +2 to move. That's huge on your first turn. You have another rune that enhances the rend of all your weapons. It's all kind of stuff like that. So you can really think about, what do I need this turn? What do I need to happen this turn to advance my agenda here? And you can use that rune.
And you can choose whichever you want to use, and you have to roll for it, or does it work like the Maggotkin cycle, kind of like what do you call it, circle that it cycles through all these runes, and you can just move forward and backwards, or how does it work?
So at the beginning of your hero phase, before you do anything, you have to declare which rune you're using.
Okay.
And then you roll a die. And on a 6, you get the enhanced effect, which is usually what has already happened times 2, or maybe with another buff in a similar vein. If you roll a 1, you're safe, but if you roll a 6, you get some extra stuff. But you got to do it first thing in your hero phase.
Okay. And once so it goes off no matter what, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just the 6 makes it explode. It's like the enhanced effect.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, great. So okay, so how do you think the army, just in general, performs with such a limited amount of units available to it. It's very elite. It's very specialized because of that, right? Like, there's not too many kind of diverse builds. Like, for example, Cities of Sigmar with its 60-something unit selection. Like, tell us a bit about your impressions of its unit non-selection, I guess, or
Yeah.
non-diversity.
Well, I think if you're interested in diversity, Fyreslayers is not the place for you. And what I mean by that is that the army is 2 infantry kits. There's a bunch of heroes, but they're almost all the same kit as well. But you have 2 different infantry kits. One kit makes 2 units. One kit makes 1 unit. So you have Volkite Berserkers, which are sort of your basic fire dwarves. You have Auric Hearthguard, which are more elite troopers that have some ranged damage output. And then you have Hearthguard Berserkers, which are elite and really fantastic unit. And I would say that unfortunately, the way that Games Workshop has structured the book, there was what we might call convergent evolution in list building. And the whole game with list building is taking as many Hearthguard Berserkers as you can and the buffs that you think you need to augment their capabilities.
Okay, so besides the troops, which are those 2 kits, you have the Magma Droths, right?
You do, yeah. I mean, the Magma Droths are really sweet models. And they also, you don't actually see them too often in the sort of top tier competitive army. When I say top tier, I mean the lists that came out of CanCon and LVO. Among the top performers, I don't believe there were any Magma Droths present. I personally use them. I use one. I use a Runefather and Magma Droth. I find that with the buff ranges being rather small, the large base sort of assists in dealing with that, as well as they're a pretty good beat stick.
Yeah, so talking about bases, most of your troops are on 32s, right?
Yeah, they're all on 32s.
Yeah, and what's their ranges? Besides the ones that can shoot, what are the ranges of attack, and how does that play in your tactics?
Yeah, so the Volkite Berserkers are only 1-inch weapon range. So I guess, how does that play in my tactics? I don't take them, right? They're on 32 mil bases, and they have 1-inch reach. It's I'm not it's not gonna work. The Hearthguard Berserkers, though, have got 2-inch range, and both their weapons are 2-inch range. They have 2 different options. You can't mix the unit. You have to pick either poleaxe or broadaxe. But they're both 2-inch weapon range. One procs mortals on 6s. The other just is flat 2 damage with rend 1. But yeah, I mean, you want to take these big blocks of infantry. So, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So while you were explaining all that, I actually pulled up my cell phone and I'm looking at Azer, and I counted 15 unit selections, including all the characters and all of the
3 endless spells or endless prayers.
No, I didn't count those. those.
Okay.
I'm just counting the actual units and including the Underworld's warband that came out. So like we said, you do have a limited unit selection. So I mean, okay, so let's go through your list. If you can just give us like a list rundown.
Yeah.
If you can just go through the list from top to bottom, and then you can talk about your first list, how it plays, your tactics. I mean, you've already said that you play the game from an objectives point of view, not from a kill points point of view. So yeah, I mean, go ahead, buddy. Like, let us know what your list.
Yeah. So Fyreslayers, like a lot of the newer books, have what were modeled on storm hosts. In this case, I'm using Hermdar, which in my opinion, and I think a lot of other players' opinions, stands head and shoulders above the rest of the lodges. The two big benefits you get from this are immunity to battle shock, wholly within your enemy's territory, or within 12 inches, wholly within 12 inches of an objective. That's where you want to be anyway. So, and then the command ability, which allows you to activate a unit at the top of the combat phase, even in your opponent's turn. So those are sort of the two big things for Hermdar. You do get forced into taking a not so great artifact because that's the way the storm hosts work. So that's fine, but something to be aware of. But my list starts off with Auric Runefather on Magmadroth. Like I said before, I like the big base size. A lot of the buffs are 12 inches, so the bigger base size is going to work. Battlesmith can hand out. You don't have to roll for it. He just hands out +1 save, so that's great. You're playing the durability game with these infantry anyway. Auric Rune Smiter, I always mess that up. He is just a little foot hero, 120 points, that allows you to deep strike a single unit. So he, much like, I forget the Deepkin guy's name, but the Soul Scryer. So you deploy him, you can put him to the side, and then when you deploy another unit, you can say these guys are with the Rune Smitter, and then the Rune Smitter can deep strike anytime during the game. You set him up, and then you can set up a unit wholly within 12 inches of him. So that's big. You got major mobility issue with this army. Base move 4, so deep strike is a huge deal. And then I have an Auric Rune Master, which is not really an exciting hero, but he's a requirement for the battalion I want to take. And he also happens to be a priest, so it's not so bad. Then I have 3 units of 20 Hearthguard Berserkers. These guys are, they're really tough to kill, and they hit like a freight train. So just to run you through their war scroll here. Let's see, what are they? So they've got 2 wounds each, base 5-up save. If they have a single friendly Fyreslayers hero within, not wholly within, 10 inches of them, they get the 4-up Feel No Pain. Otherwise, it's just a flat 6-up. So they are really tough to kill. 2 wounds, 4-up Feel No Pain if you're watching your placement. And then again, we've got 2 different weapon options here. We have the pole axes or the broad axes. Both are really solid output, though.
And they also have the throwing axes as a little missile at 8 inches too, right?
Yeah, I have to confess, though, I forget about those a lot of the time because they are so ineffective.
Yeah, it's just like deploying off that 1 extra wound or something, maybe.
Yeah, you could probably kill like 2 or 3 skeletons with a unit of 20 throwing axes. But
yeah,
anyway,
what is that? 1 attack, 5-up, 5-up, no rend, 1 damage. So that's just
exactly it. Yeah. So, and then finally, the Lords of the Lodge Battalion. So Lords of the Lodge Battalion contains Runefather, Battlesmith, and a Rune Master, and then 1 unit of Hearthguard Berserkers. And what this it's unbelievable, this battalion. It allows the unit of Hearthguard Berserkers in the battalion to activate twice if at the beginning of the combat phase you have a hero from that battalion, which is 3 different heroes. And in my case, that's the Runefather on Magmadroth, Battlesmith, and Rune Master. Wholly within 12 of that unit, they can activate twice. So that's pretty crazy, right? Especially because for 1 CP, you can also activate at the top of the combat phase. And that's the whole list.
So you're technically going 3 times a turn?
No. You're going 2. But one of them, you can opt to go at the top of the combat phase. The top of the combat phase activation doesn't add an activation; it just changes when it happens.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's the whole kind of activation wars that everybody was talking about. Okay.
Yeah. And then I think something that often gets overlooked with the Lords of the Lodge battalion, I think people look at it and they just see damage output. But your pile-in move is 3 inches, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're piling in twice, so 6 inches instead of 3, again, for a mobility-restricted army, I think it's a big deal.
Absolutely. And you're surprisingly fast because of the prayer at the beginning with a +2 to move, and then you can run in charge, right?
Yeah, the rune. So the rune gives you the +2 to move, and if you roll 6 on that one, then you get +2 to charge. And with one of the prayers, which you're getting +1 on from your little terrain piece, the pizza oven, on a 3-up, a unit can run and charge. So now a unit with base move 4 just became base move 6 with run and charge. So if you want to spend a command point to turn that run roll into a 6, you're going to move 12 inches, and then potentially looking at a 2d6 +2 charge.
Yeah. So to confess, I was on the receiving end of the of the empowered version of that. At one of the tournaments that we played at Mythico Studios, and this guy came across the table like 24 to 30 inches or something. It was something ridiculous like that, and he smashed right into my rocket batteries and all my flagellants and everything. I was playing a Cities of Sigma army that wasn't quite put together yet, so I kind of have a little bit of like an issue with Fyreslayers from that point of view. So
the other thing
tell us about deployment now. I don't want to interrupt you. Keep going with your idea, but after that, tell us a bit about deployment and how you deploy. Because you mentioned about deep striking a little bit with your runesmitter, and also based on the mission, how you use the armies in different ways.
Okay, so I was just going to say that if you get that empowered rune off with the +2 to charge, the deep strike unit, like almost all deep strike, it has to be set up 9 inches away from enemy models. So if you now have +2 on your charge, you're looking at a 7 command point, reroll it, 7 rerollable. I think is around 50-50. So pretty solid.
Yeah,
but as far as deployment, a lot of the buff ranges are pretty restrictive. The Lords of the Lodge is 12 inches. You don't really have that great of movement. So if you have one unit that flies across the table because of a successful charge, you got to be careful about getting outside of 10 inches of a friendly character and losing your feel no pain. So I guess in terms of deployment, I'm always thinking about what is the shortest straight line distance to get my units onto objectives. And I think with this army, because I'm 4 drops, I seriously consider going first almost every time. The idea being that I can pop the move rune, maybe take a run roll and move across the table to you, and maybe, depending on the mission, either hold that deep strike unit, mission like Star Strike, I might hold that unit off the table a little bit, or I might just drop that unit right away. The other thing I use the deep strike for is I mentioned just now how sometimes these units can really fly across the table and the heroes can't keep up. So it's nice to have a character that can deep strike, because you can have that unit fly across the table and deep strike a character in a place where he's going to be within 10 inches of that unit to grant the feel no pain.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what I've also saw you do is you have your runesmitter and also your character on the Magmadroth kind of tag both ends of your Hearthguard Berserkers. for that 4-up feel no pain, right? Because then, yeah, I mean, I can shoot your smitter with one of my rockets and kill him off. But then you have your magma drought, and then you also have a special artifact or something that doesn't allow me to target it. Or am I getting that wrong? I
No,
forget what the rules.
you're not getting that wrong. So I think the thing that you need to really consider when you're playing this army is the idea of redundancy when it comes to characters within 10 inches of the unit. If you have a single character, especially when you're playing a shooting army, like your rockets, for instance, that don't need line of sight. If you
Well, they
have
do
a
now, but yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But if you have a single character within 10 inches of a unit that when he's there is going to get a 4-up feel no pain, a good opponent, the first thing they're going to do is try to kill that character, right? So if you have two within 10 inches of 2 units, it makes things a little more challenging for your opponent. And what I have been habitually doing is taking the Ragged Cloak, which is one of the realm artifacts. So that's once per game in your opponent's shooting phase, at the beginning of the shooting phase. You can say, this character here is going to use the Ragged Cloak. He may not be targeted this turn by shooting. So
yeah, so that's like an extra layer of protection, and also gives you that one extra round of 4-up saves on your like the core of your army,
Yeah, exactly. So I give the Ragged Cloak to the Runesmitter because that character is usually very far forward and a very tempting target. And sort of in conjunction with the Magmadroth. The Magmadroth's 14 wounds. So, there's a little bit of I have never seen the Magmadroth get killed to one single round of shooting. So, between those two things, you're pretty safe.
I might have to work towards that.
Yeah. I'm sure it can be done. I've been very lucky and haven't played. Like what's the one? The Shootcast army with the 9 or 12 long strike raptors shooting twice. I'm sure that they could.
Oh, that's a very, very strong kind of list. So in terms of different missions, like you've kind of briefly went over all the army and kind of what it does, and it's kind of is there any diversity in the tactics of this army, or is that what it's built towards? Is there like a singular kind of focus to it, or can you actually play it in different ways?
Yeah, I would say that you could try, but I think if you're playing competitively, there's no diversity in kit choice, unit choice, or really even tactics. I think that I have another list that we can go over later. There's some different takes on how to do this, but in general, the idea is get Hearthguard Berserkers on objectives using Hermdar, so they're battle shock immune and can activate at the top of the combat phase. And the army just kind of plays like a wet blanket. You're just smothered by the thing.
All right. So if you're looking for different play styles and stuff, maybe Fyreslayers are not your go-to, but then if you just want to have that one tactic that works really well, I guess this is what you're looking for.
Yeah, and I also think that there's a lot of reliability baked in to the Fyreslayers.
For sure.
There's no reliance on magic. There are several, magic dominant armies out there right now. Tzeentch being a big one. If you're relying on rolling a 6 or a 7 on 2d6 to get your important buffs off, I think in the current meta it's going to be challenging. But Fyreslayers use either buffs that you don't have to roll for, or prayers, which cannot be dispelled.
Okay. So in this army, I'm sorry, you didn't have any endless spells, did you?
I didn't take any. I think that the runic firewall, which is a carbon copy of prismatic palisade, it's a prayer or a magmic invocation.
That goes off on a 3-up.
Let's see. I got it right here. I had it right here. Yeah, looks like a 3-up. But yeah. So it's great. I mean, it blocks line of sight, and you can use it to sort of move block people, but it is 40 points.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe think about that. The other thing that I have to say, I'm not a huge fan of the Magmic Invocations. At the top of every battle round, you have to see they're unstable, so you have to roll to see if it's going to stay on the table.
Mm-hmm.
And you get a buff to that. So on a 4-up, it stays. Anything else, it goes away. If you have a priest within so many inches, you get a +1 to that roll.
Looks like we lost them slightly again. We're having some difficulties.
Going first.
Oh, sorry. You just came back again. Sorry.
That's okay.
Within 30 seconds. Okay, so yeah, you're saying that on a 4-up they disappear?
On a 4-up they disappear, but if you have a priest within so many inches, you get a +1 to that roll, which is good. Okay. But the thing that I didn't like about it is that first you have to basically cast the thing, right? You have to get the priest to get out in the first place. And having planned to go first, basically whenever I can, that means that I'm first going to have to roll to place the thing. I'm going to do my turn. You're going to then take your turn. And if I get doubled, which is pretty likely, 60-40 these days, but it feels like almost every time, right? That's the way it goes. Now, at the top of that battle round, we have to see if that thing sticks around. So now I have to roll for that twice for it to be useful going into the double turn. So that's kind of why I'm a little lukewarm on the magnet firewall, or runic firewall.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Right. What about the other magmic invocation, the fire golem thing?
I got him right here. So the Infernoth is a super cool model. It's worth mentioning that. The Infernoth is like the like big burly sort of magma dude. It looks really nice, and I've seen some really cool conversions with that model. People putting like the Rune Father on top of him to make it like a Magmadroth or something like that. It's okay. So after this model moves, it's just like a Predatory Endless spell. You roll 12 dice for each unit within 3 inches, and for each 6, you get a mortal wound. And Fyreslayers are not affected, so nobody can flip it on you and do damage. But 12 dice, 6s do mortal wounds.
That's like 2 or 3.
Yeah, 2 or 3. Because these things all cost around 50 points. They range between 40 and 60. So it's not really, would I rather have a command point, or would I rather have this silly thing that might do 2 or 3 mortal wounds? Right. The Flame Spitter is kind of interesting because Fyreslayers are largely devoid of any meaningful ranged output. But this thing, you set it up like a little artillery piece, and then you pick a unit within 24 inches, roll 12 dice, and if it's a big unit, you add 2 to the die roll, so 20 or more models. So instead of a 6-up, you get mortal wounds, you get them on a 4. So that's pretty solid, but horde clearance is not an issue for this army. Mm-hmm. Character sniping is. So I would say that the Flame Spitter is, again, kind of a point sink that maybe you could spend more judiciously somewhere else.
Of course.
Yeah.
So what would you see going forward if you would have to change this army in any meaningful way? I mean, nothing really, right? I mean, like, you're very limited in unit selection, but just in general, say like brand new units. are going to be created, what would you like to see?
Oh, well, I mean, if I could have a new unit, I would love to see like a mini kind of Magmadroth cavalry, either with
that's what I was thinking too.
Yeah. Fyreslayers on it, or just the little Magmadroths running around like big dogs. I think that would be super cool, because the Magmadroth model, I don't know if you haven't seen it in person. You gotta hold one of these things. GW every once in a while puts out a sculpt that is like, almost all their stuff's good, but every once in a while they put out something that's like really over the top great. And I think the Magmadroth model is one of those.
Awesome, man. Yeah. So how does this army play, or how tactically, if you're playing Knife to the Heart versus Better Parts of Valor versus Total Commitment? Like some of these missions that you see in competitive plays. One would be like an alpha bunker kind of thing, where not alpha bunker, sorry, like a castle. Where you have Knives to the Heart. The other one doesn't allow you to, deploy off the table, and another one like burns objectives. So talk a little bit about some of the missions that you see and play with this army.
So I guess with a Knife to the Heart style mission, there's that other one. Blood and Glory is similar to Knife to the Heart. It's just got 4 objectives. I think that those missions are quite good for Fyreslayers. They have really good damage output, and you're really not going to be in a position, I think, where you're losing a ton of models. So you can hang on to your objective while kind of going out and trying to get your opponents. The big thing with Knife to the Heart, I think a lot of people end up with minor wins on, just because the risk of trying to get your opponent's objective is often not worth it. So people will sit and just try to do damage. But I think Fyreslayers, when you consider the deep strike mechanic with the Runesmitter, are in a good position to play that mission for the major win. When you're talking about like a burning mission, like which you mentioned, Better Power or Valor, or maybe Scorched Earth, something like that. Those missions, I think I've had good luck with them, mainly because of the deep strike. But I think the issue there becomes watching your backfield. As you might have noticed from my list, it's basically 4 heroes and 3 big blocks of infantry. So I don't have any kind of useless units to stay in the backfield and screen 9 inches out if you have deep strike. So I think that you can have success in those missions, but late game, it could get challenging if you're further forward than maybe you'd like to be, and you don't, because you really don't have anything that you can just leave back. That's not really an option for you. And then the other thing there is you're immune to battle shock wholly within 12 inches of an objective. If you burn that, you lose that ability. So, and then the final objective type, which is more of you mentioned specifically Total Commitment, which is kind of your standard take and hold style mission, couple objectives, kind of sparsely throughout the board, in that case 4, but that has the added caveat of no deep strike. I don't think that the no deep strike is a huge deal for Fyreslayers. I think in the old book it was. In this book, with the movement rune, the run and charge, and the hitting on the top of the combat phase, all that nonsense, I think it's not a big deal. But take and hold style missions are really where Fyreslayers excel, because you can, most of the time, you're going to be lower drops than your opponent. You can get on those objectives, and good luck. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, I mentioned those 3 missions specifically because they're diverse tactics from one another.
Definitely.
One is definitely like, if you hold that one objective, you automatically win the game turn 3,
Yeah.
Then the other one like actually cancels your deep strike. So I just wanted to know, and maybe the viewers would like to know if that is a make it or break it kind of like tactic for you. And then the scorched earth, or better parts of valor, that you burn their objectives and therefore you don't get that immunity to bravery. So all right, so let's take a very quick break, and you guys do whatever you guys need to do, like get a drink, and then we'll see you on the flip side, guys. All right, thanks. Welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a good intermission. And we're back with Jake over here talking about Fyreslayers. We're going to go over the second list. And yeah, Jake, tell us about the second list and how it's different than the first, and why you've chosen to make it and build it.
Sure. So I should say this is not my list. This is a gentleman named Jeremy, and I'm not going to try with his last name, but he's a well-known West Coast player who placed second at LVO this past year. So, or this most recent LVO. Sorry that. And I think that he's a pretty well-known, excellent Warhammer player. He's done well at a number of events. And his list is in the vein of what I've put together, with a couple little caveats that I think address a lot of the shortcomings of my list and of the army at large. Mm-hmm. So he's got the Runefather on foot. I've got the Magmadroth. He's got the Runefather on foot. He's got the Battlesmith, the Runesmitter, and then a Grimwrath Berserker. So I'm not sure what he's doing with the Grimwrath Berserker, but Jeremy's a pretty sharp guy, so I think he knows what he's doing. And he's also got a Rune Master. So you'll notice that he's got all the heroes there for Lords of the Lodge. Lords of the Lodge does not specify if a hero is on a Magmadroth or not. It can be either. So he's gone for the lower cost foot heroes instead of the... so an Auric Runefather is 100 points, but I pay 280 to put him on a Magmadroth there. So there's a pretty big difference. Then he's got 2 units of 20 Hearthguard Berserkers, 1 unit of 10 Hearthguard Berserkers, and then 2 units of Auric Hearthguard, and then Lords of the Lodge. So I think the big difference here is he's gone for the foot heroes. And instead of the Ragged Cloak, being super worried about shooting like I am, he's gone for the required artifact for Hermdar. He's also running Hermdar. And an artifact called the Nulsen Icon, which is an anti-endless spell tool. So if you have a unit within 12 inches, wholly within 12 inches of the artifact bearer, and they get tagged with an endless spell, on a 4-up, they just ignore the entire effects of the spell. So it's useful, especially if you think you're going to be playing against, some big, scary, endless spells, like the Tzeentch ones, Demon Fire Rift, all that kind of stuff. This was before that, though. It can be good. I personally have not had issues with endless spells, especially considering Hearthguard Berserkers have got a 4-up Feel No Pain against wounds and mortal wounds. But he feels he needs that. So,
Maybe because of the Purple Sun? You know, 6-ups, it automatically kills like a model, and it's regardless of wounds, unless you're 5 or more.
Yeah, it could. Purple Sun is definitely, Fyreslayer Kryptonite or Hearthguard Berserker Kryptonite for sure. So maybe that's what he's thinking about, especially in an army where you have no dispel. Not
Right.
You have access to dispel, but in the list that I discussed that I run, and in Jeremy's list here, he has no dispel. So 2 units of 20 Hearthguard Berserkers, 1 unit of 10 Hearthguard Berserkers, 2 units of 5 Auric Hearthguard. I think what he's done there is tried to add some ranged output with the Auric Hearthguard. But we discussed with these sort of burn missions, or any mission that requires you to move long distances, leaving your zone, you kind of have, I can't sit at the back of the board with a 400-point unit of Hearthguard Berserkers and watch my backboard edge. That's just a waste. So instead, I haven't seen him play this, but if I were to play this army, I think that those 2 units of 5, not only with the fairly good shooting attack, but they can also stay back and sort of occupy the midfield or maybe your deployment zone, so you're not so open to issues with those sorts of missions. Yeah. So, and he placed second at LVO with this, so that's pretty good. Losing 1 game to the final. I mean, you can't argue with results.
No, you can't. But I can definitely argue with player skill. I think one of the things I personally love about Age of Sigmar is that a player that knows how to play the game, knows how to play the missions, understands army synergies, not only your own, but also the opponent's army synergies, can take a mediocre list and do way better than it is on paper.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I just think in this case that Jeremy is not only an outstanding player, but he has a pretty unbelievable list. So
yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying. So he definitely knows how to master and pilot this list pretty well. So in general, if you're looking at the Fyreslayers and you're looking at its tactics, what type of role would you see it fit into? Because you said kind of like alpha bunkering, but is there any other types of list that you can imagine they might excel at if they get a tweak here or there? Is there any type of other type of tactic?
Definitely. I mean, the reason that they play alpha bunker so well is because they're so hard to kill, and those 20-man units are so points efficient, right? 400 points for 20 of them. So I think there's a couple of things here. I think that playing against them is not fun, if I'm being completely honest with you. I do not think it is a positive player experience for your opponent to play a hyper competitive Fyreslayers list, because there's very little that you can do against it unless you have some outstanding shooting. And
that was a segue into my next question. Like, how do you defeat them?
Okay. Well, let me finish this one first.
Sure, of course.
But I think that I almost wish that Fyreslayers were a great and could be a great MSU army, so multiple small unit army. I think that 5 Hearthguard Berserkers are still a steal from points wise, and they're great. I mean, their damage output is great, and they've got the feel no pain. And even if they're far from the character, they just have like a slightly worse version of the feel no pain. So I think that there's room for kind of a little bit of like list growth there.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think it's going to happen unless we see a change in this summer's general's handbook, right? Because right now you can get 20 Hearthguard Berserkers for 400 points.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, any competitive player that's thinking about Fyreslayers is going to go that route.
Right. We might have to wait till the summer to see what points increases or point differences we might see. Because I totally agree with you. For what they do, their points are absolutely amazing.
I mean, if you just lost the horde bonus on them,
mm-hmm.
because they have a horde bonus at 20 models. If you lost that, maybe you would start seeing people take one block of 20 to go on Lords of the Lodge, and then there's another battalion that's 3 units of our Hearthguard. So maybe you would start seeing, 3 units of 5 or 10 are Hearthguard, a little bit of mixed what's going on. Could make the lists maybe a little more interesting, certainly more fun to play against.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Also, quick question. What are the other lodges that you might see potential?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I got that right here. So I think you're going to see Hermdar for a long, long time. And that's mostly because of the command ability. I think the Battle Shock immunity thing is huge, but I really that 1 CP activated on the top of the combat phase is huge. Let me pull it up here.
Because you have Hermdar and you have the Alpha Bunkering, but what if you ran other types of battalions or other types of lodges?
Yeah.
Like how does your army how would your army evolve tactically?
So there is one. I don't want to spend time looking it up right now, but there is one lodge that favors Magma Droths. Mm-hmm. And I think that would also be a really interesting list build. I think Games Workshop is trying to give us this option of playing Monster Mash. They just haven't really executed it well, if you're
mm-hmm.
from a competitive point of view. But potentially with a couple of points tweaks here or there, it might be cool to see 4 or 5 Magma Droths out on the table.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you got like in Lizardman, you got the Thunder Lizards battalion.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to they're trying to add armies which are like entirely like big dudes. I mean, the Ale Guzzlers are coming out soon. So it's gonna be all giants.
Yeah, I think that hordes are bad for Warhammer, and I think that they know that, and they are trying. But it's just going to take some time.
Yeah, I don't blame the competitive community in the slightest. But you look at a unit, you say this is the most efficient for the points.
Yeah,
it does the most damage. Let me just spam it, because the whole point of going to a competitive event is to win.
Yeah,
I mean, yes,
or at least do your best.
Yeah, at least do your best, exactly. But I mean, a lot of people are there just to get, have a couple of beers and make friends and all that, which is awesome. Like that's how it should be. But then, if you're gonna spend like $60 for a GT and then fly or maybe stay at a hotel or something, at least come into the competition with intent to win. So
I mean, But I think that there's a couple things that you can do with this book. I think that and from the player piloting the army's perspective, and also the Magma Droth spam would just be so cool to see on the tabletop. Yeah.
Again, we lost you there for just a split second.
Oh, man. Okay. That's okay. That's okay. I was just saying that I think MSU would be a great avenue for Games Workshop to go down in terms of rebalancing this army. And also Magma Droth spam would just be really cool to see on the tabletop.
Yeah, for sure. And then if you're going to look in your crystal ball of magic, that you actually are one of the best psychic predictors out there. Like you've briefly mentioned, a cavalry, like a mini Magmadroth cavalry would be absolutely awesome.
Yeah.
What else would you like to see? Would you like to see some sort of ranged war machines or some sort of, I don't know, bound beasts of lava beasts that like spit kind of like maybe like salamanders in Lizardmen or what else would you like to see?
I guess honestly, I think that another infantry kit would be great. I doubt that's going to ever happen, but there's just no kit diversity in this army. There's, like I said before, 3 infantry units, 2 infantry kits. So, and they all look the same. So that's not great. So another infantry kit would be cool. I don't know, maybe some sort of like magma, conjured magma kind of infantry thing. That would be interesting. But I'll be honest with you, I think that model-wise, they're in a much better place than most people would lead you to believe. I think that the 2 big things I would like to see are tweak to the internal balance of the book. Obviously, right now, Hermdar, Hearthguard Berserker spam is the only way to play competitively. And the Magmic invocations are so cool looking. Those sculpts are so nice, but they're so bad. I mean, 12 dice, 6s do mortal wounds. Like, come on.
Yeah, for 50 points. I mean, that's a little sad,
Yeah.
Sad because I really want to see them on the table, and I want them to be used.
Yeah, especially the Molten Infernoth, right? Like that is so cool. And even though it kind of pushes the army aesthetic into a certain kind of area, keeping with the sort of okay, Fyreslayers, sure, but it is pushing it towards the whole like magma look.
Right.
It would just be nice if that thing wasn't terrible.
Yeah. Also the Forge World, the Chaos Dwarves, Legion of Asgore have those Fireborn Kadai. It would be cool to see some sort of link to these like Fireborn creatures in Fyreslayer army potentially.
Yeah. Or even just an
things.
improvement to the Auric Hearthguard shooting, because even though it's pretty good, they do hit on 4s.
Yeah, it's what, 8 inches or something very.
No, the magma pikes 18-inch range, 2 shots,
okay.
4s, 3s, rend 1, damage 1, and then some extra bonus against monsters.
Okay, but they don't get any synergy with a +1 to hit or anything like that, do they? No. Okay. Next question, which is very important: allies. What type of allies could you consider for an army? If you would take anything, either Caradron for shooting, would that be? I mean, do they even like each other? Do they hate each other? What's going on over there?
Yeah, so I think their Stormcast are an option here, right? And I think Stormcast are a good option. Specifically, oh man, I'm drawing a blank on that guy, on the character's name. Not the big wizard, the little wizard that has the Dispel Scroll.
The Incantor, the Knight Incantor.
Knight Incantor. I know there are some other local Fyreslayers players that really like taking an Incantor. And I think that's a great idea, right? I mean, it does bring you up a whole nother drop because he doesn't fit in any of the battalions in Fyreslayers. But having a once per game auto dispel is pretty huge, especially talking about Tzeentch, Demon Fire Rift, all that kind of scary stuff. Kharadron are also an option. The new book for KO has there's some interesting mobile firepower there. And I think maybe that hasn't been explored. But I think the thing with Fyreslayers is those runes that we talked about at the beginning here only affect Fyreslayers units. So anytime you are spending points on allies, you are reducing the effectiveness of your allegiance abilities. So I think most people, when they think about allies, think about a single model, and that's the Knight Incantor.
For sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So you don't see any type of elven allies from cities or anything like that? Maybe some shadow warriors that can deep strike and shoot, or like nothing like that?
No. I'd have to double check their allies list, but it's pretty short. I think it's actually just.
It is actually, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's just Stormcast, KO, and one other.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, we're coming up to the end of the show, and I mean, thank you so much for that kind of
thanks for having me.
Insightful thing. But I want to end the show with 3 questions that I end all the shows with.
All right, fire away.
One would be, because you mentioned not Cardinal, sorry, Fyreslayers, and how like the book needs a little bit of internal balance and all that. Before the book gets completely redone from the ground up, say it does, okay? What would be the one thing you would never change about the book? Either the lore, a battalion, a unit, or an ability, or some sort of synergy. What's the one thing that you love about this book?
I would never change the runes. I think the runes are not only, pretty balanced, but I think that they add some really interesting depth to the army in terms of per turn rule flexibility. When you need that rend, you're against that thing with a good save, but it doesn't have the ethereal amulet. You can get that extra rend. When you need that extra movement, you can get that extra movement. And I think it's pretty interesting to have a mechanic like that makes you think ahead. Yes, I can.
Welcome to the show.
Oh my God.
Join us. No, it's totally fine. Yeah. Actually, I'm in my architecture office, and there's people working in other rooms. I've tried to,
Oh, really? That's pretty funny.
So no problem. All right. So, okay, question number 2. If the book gets locked, that's it. Games Workshop comes out tomorrow and says, that's it. Like, this book will never, ever change again. Right?
Sure.
You've kind of mentioned it. You skimmed through it a little bit. But what would be something that you must change before this book never changes again?
Yeah, they got to dump that Horde bonus for the 20-man units of Hearthguard Berserkers. I think there's a competitive build there, without the Horde bonus. But if we're gonna all have to live with this until the end of time, I don't really think it's fair to people to continue to allow that travesty to occur.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, I thought you were going to say add more kind of battle line units or more infantry to the.
No. They gotta make this army. It's great in top tier play, but I think against like middle tier play, it's just it's disgusting.
Yeah, because maybe somebody who's never played them before, right? They come into one of the local, hobby shops or whatever, and they're like, oh, those look really cool. I want to play the fire dwarves. I want to play like the lava guys, with the giant lizards, and then they buy it not from a competitive point of view, but because they love the way it looks, or maybe they love the lore or something, so then they're going to be hated because it's not fun to play against. So
yeah. Well, it's not even so much about that. It's
of course I'm exaggerating.
Yeah. It's just healthy to have, a book that's not only balanced sort of in the bigger picture, but I think almost as important is the internal balance, right? You want to be able to build the army in a couple different ways, whether you're coming at it from a hobby perspective, you want the magma dross on the table, or more of a competitive perspective. There has to be options. Otherwise, it's what we're seeing right now is it's one book with one good unit, and that's it.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because I mean I think one other army that suffers from the same type of idea is the Osiric Born Reapers, where you've got
Mm,
like the Petrifex with a 3-up save that goes to a 2-up. And then you have the DPR, like the damage prevention rolls of a 4-up, just like you do. And and that's the only thing you see played in the competitive scene.
yeah, I think there's no real rhyme or reason to it. Sometimes they really get it right, and other times it's just like a total swing and a miss. Like
Hmm.
I think Sylvaneth, right? Great internal balance in that new book. There's a
Oh, it's
ton.
absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
There's a ton of different ways to build that army, and they're all bad, right? So
Yeah, I
yeah,
literally dropped before the book came out. I literally dropped like $300 to $400
yeah,
on a brand new Sylvaneth army because I had an idea of what I wanted to do, and then I read the book. I was like, oh
yeah,
Jesus,
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know, like
I mean, I'm sure I shouldn't say that they're all bad. I'm sure
no,
that
no, no, no.
somewhere somebody has figured it out, and it just I haven't. But
Hmm.
yeah,
No, well, actually, I agree because how do I put this into words? There's definitely an amount of probability that occurs based on how often an army is played. So for example,
yeah, maybe.
if you saw maybe like a 20 to 30% increase in people taking the Sylvaneth to tournaments, you
Yeah,
might also increase its percentage of winning rate, you know?
I think the thing with that though is like the if you're talking about tournaments and the number of players there with a specific army, um, I think it's pretty closely correlated with how apparently broken that book is, right?
Hmm.
If the book looks like there or has an obvious build, right? Has a very like, you take this, and this, and it's fairly, normal cost. I mean, financially normally costed. Um, then you're going to see that army a lot. I think it's probably a reason you don't see Fyreslayers. There is a very apparent build there, uh, but the lists that we've talked about today are astronomically expensive. They're crazy because it's that one kit, Hearthguard Berserkers. 5 of them are $50, and you need 60. So it adds up quick.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, that was actually one of the other questions I wanted to ask
Mm.
you about how easy it is to get into it. Like
Mm.
what's the jump off point for you to actually have a 2,000 point army?
Yeah.
And yeah.
I mean, I think it's easy to get into because the lists are easy, right? There's not really a lot of variance in list building. You can, take something more like what I've done, which is like really spanning the Hearthguard Berserkers. Some other people have gone some different routes, but I think from that perspective, it's easy. To me, when I start a new army, the hardest part is figuring out the direction I want to go.
Hmm.
And that has been well fleshed out at this point. But financially, Fyreslayers are going to be one of the most expensive armies you can play. They're up there with Daughters of Cain. It's
Hmm.
like I said, five of those guys is $50, so it adds up quick when you need 60.
Yeah, I didn't know you only get 5 in the unit.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
and in the early days, they were always out of stock, so you had to be calling around. If you're like me, I bought like half of it at Maplewood Hobby, and then the rest of it I had to call different stores on the East Coast saying, "Hey, do you have a box of these guys? Will you ship them to me?" And I had to do that at like 4 or 5 different shops to get the army together.
Okay, so it's not a very friendly kind of jumping point if you want to
Yeah, I
build
mean they're
this
both.
horde.
Yeah, they should be back in stock now.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But it
What do you think of the starter kit? And where do you go from there? Like, say if somebody buys a starter kit and a box of troops and the endless spells, or the magmic invocations as they are called.
Yeah. So the Star Collecting box, I think, is actually a pretty good deal. Even though, so it's got 10 Volkite Berserkers, 1 foot hero sprue. I think it's the Rune Smitter. I can't remember off the top of my head. And then a Magmadroth kit. The Magmadroth kit builds all 3 Magmadroth options.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are like me and like the Magmadroth model enough to take it, even though it might not be the most optimal thing, you kind of get a deal, because I think the Start Collecting is like $20 more or $10 more than just the Magmadroth kit. And you get that extra foot hero you're going to need anyway. You're going to do nothing with the Volkite Berserkers, but
Yeah. Okay, so very last question before we say goodbye. What is your MVP of the entire Battletome?
Yeah, I mean, I think you know the answer to this, and anybody who's listening, and it's Hearthguard Berserkers. They are an unbelievably, I mean, if you want to talk about a unit that can do it all except move quickly every turn in the game, they're great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, man. Well,
yeah.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for sharing your army. Thank you for sharing your models that have been going up throughout the episode. And definitely, what is actually, before you go, what is maybe a twinge or a sparkle in your eye for your next army? Can we get a little?
Yeah.
Can we get a little preview of that? Because we might have you on for that.
Yeah, so I have been working on the Big Wog recently. I wanted something a little more, maybe less static, less autopilot. Mm-hmm. So I've been working on that. Painting up a Maw Crusher right now. We'll see how he comes out.
Very cool, very cool.
Yeah.
So as everybody knows, we don't do previews of books. We don't do kind of like off the cuff kind of ideas and responses. We actually like to play test books and kind of understand the armies in depth and have people that actually have experience with the army before we actually bring people on to talk about things. So once we play a few games, Jake, and once we might even do a couple of battle reports, so it'll be fun,
Yeah.
Then we'll have you on to really kind of give us the lowdown on everything that you've learned from the Big Wah.
Yeah, sounds good.
Awesome, man. Again, thank you so much for coming, and we'll see you shortly. This has been Kraken Gaming. Make sure you subscribe. All right, guys, bye. You're not gonna say bye, Jake?
Oh, goodbye.
All right, guys, peace out.